Hello guys, welcome back. My name is Nathan and today we're going to be ranking every single NHL team's first line from worst to best. Now we have done centers, left wingers, right wingers, starting goaltenders, number one defenseman, ranked them all, and it is all led up to this point for every single team's first line. But where does your favorite NHL team's first line rank, and who are the worst and best first lines in the entire NHL? Watch till the end for the complete ranking and all of the picks, and make sure you hit that subscribe button if you are new. 50% of you guys aren't subscribed, so without further ado, let's get into the first line rankings. So now we can officially get into it, and I want to get quickly into this because we got a lot of lines and a lot of players to go through. So let's start out at the worst place spot, number 32, and just barely being in this last place spot, I have the Chicago Blackhawks, with Lukas Reichel on the left, Max Domi at center, and Patrick Kane on the right. That's what I see the first line for the Blackhawks mostly being, and being this next season. And I think it mostly comes down to, with Reichel, almost no NHL experience, with Domi kind of being really inconsistent over these past 3 years, but Patrick Kane is obviously the big one there, still being a top winger out there, and he was really the only reason why this line was even close to not being last place. But looking at the defensive impacts, looking at, again, just how raw it is, it has to be last place. Next up, let's go on to number 31, and the line that just barely beat Chicago's, literally by inches, and I could see you also having Chicago instead. But at number 31, I am going to go on to the Montreal Canadiens with Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki, and Josh Anderson. Now, to me, it also suffers from the kind of the same issues a little bit with Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki, especially being super young in their NHL careers, but I couldn't really have them at the last place spot simply because of what Nick Suzuki has already shown, still Josh Anderson being a decent player, and what Cole Caulfield has shown in his short career. But I do expect this line to be way higher, as especially Caulfield and Suzuki get way better. Now, going on to the opposite type of team, the first line that I probably see getting worse over these next couple of years, going on to number 30 and going on to the Philadelphia Flyers with Joel Verity, Sean Couturier, and Cam Atkinson. Now, it's decent, but I also feel like with the lost games of Sean Couturier over these past 3 years, it's really put a damper on this line. Cam Atkinson has been solid with the Flyers. Joel Verity has been solid in his NHL career, age 22, over these last couple of years. But I also do feel like, in terms of the pure amazing offensive impact, it isn't quite there, and the Flyers do hurt because of it. Next up, going to another pretty young raw line, a pretty raw one as well. Let's go on to number 29, the 29th first line in the league, and let's go on to the Anaheim Ducks with Adam Henrique, Trevor Zegras, and Troy Terry. Now, the first line will be pretty different next year, but considering how good Troy Terry has been in these last couple of years, and also Trevor Zegras being solid in his first rookie season, I definitely think it definitely pushes it ahead just a little bit. Adam Henrique can also play pretty well. 42 points in 58 games. So everybody is solid contributors. Nothing that's amazing, but also nothing that is horrible either. Now going on to a line that if you're just judging off the last year would be way higher. But again, with all the rankings that we've done, we go through a 3-year sample size. So seasons back in 2020 still do count towards the rankings. I'm going to go next up, though, at number 28 and move on to an interesting one here in the Buffalo Sabres with Jeff Skinner, Tage Thompson, and Alex Tuch. Again, the line that if it was just this year would be much higher, but you got Jeff Skinner really only having a good season this last year, 33 goals in 80 games, which was amazing. Same thing with Tage Thompson, just exploding out of nowhere, 68 points, 38 goals, and then you got Alex Tuch having a great season in his first really solid year in Buffalo, 38 points in 50 games. If they continue that type of play, they will be higher, and as the Sabres get better, they'll also probably benefit from it too. Next up, moving on to number 27, just outside of the bottom 5 here, and a team I just give the edge to because of slightly better sample size in the New York Islanders with Anders Lee, Matthew Barzal, and Josh Bailey. Now, I will say, neither of these three have had as good of a season as the line that the Sabres had this last year, but you do have more longevity, of course, with Anders Lee, and especially players like Matthew Barzal, but I do feel like this is also a line that if the offense for the Islanders doesn't get their crap put together, could definitely be lower after next year. But now going on to the 26th first line in the league, and let's go on to the Seattle Kraken's first line with Burakovsky-Gourde, and Jordan Eberle. As I was going through the right wing, center, left wing rankings, it was pretty hard to assemble what I thought could be the Kraken's first line, but if it does end up being this, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, especially especially when all these guys are healthy. I think they can be pretty impactful, and Burakovsky's creativity will help that top 6 for the Kraken so much. Next up, moving on to number 25, a team that's first line you might think would actually be a little bit higher, or I guess technically lower on the list, down more in the bottom 5, but I think should be this high, in the Arizona Coyotes with Clayton Keller, Nick Schmaltz, and Travis Boyd. Now here's the thing, it is absolutely carried by Clayton Keller, 100% top 15 left winger in my opinion, and he is such a big part of this Coyotes franchise. You see over the past 3 years the production on such a bad Coyotes team, and same thing goes with Nick Schmaltz this last year, 59 points in 63 games. Travis Boyd is definitely a weird one, but hey, this last year, 35 points, 17 goals in 74 games, was extremely underrated, and I think that's a good way to put this Coyotes first line. It's not good, but I think it's definitely better than some people might expect. Next up, going on to another first line you might not expect to be as good as it is, but next up I have the San Jose Sharks first line with Alexander Barabanov, Tomas Hertl, and Timo Meier. Now coming in at number 24, I feel like you could have this one just a little bit higher in some ways, but I feel like this is a good spot for it, mostly with Meier and Hertl leading the way there. Not the biggest fan of Barabanov, but kind of like Travis Boyd, he still was pretty great production-wise, 39 points in 70 games, but doesn't have much of a sample size beyond that, which does hurt him. But you do have the Tomas Hertl just being just a consistent beast over these past 3 years, and Timo Meier really becoming one of the elite right wingers in the league and slowly getting better every single year, 76 points in 77 games, and really being a big, huge leader on that Sharks forward group that, again, heading into these next couple years of rebuilding mode, he'll be needed, that's for sure. Next up, let's go on to another Pacific first line. This one is a lot different, though, in the Vancouver Canucks with Ilya Mikheyev, JT Miller, and Brock Boeser. Another line that's kind of in flux for next year. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I have a feeling that Mikheyev will be on that left side, and I think he's kind of a little bit of a weak link, even though he did get 32 points in 53 games and is being paid to have that type of production, but I do feel like the rest of his sample size isn't as good. But you have JT Miller really leading the pack on 99 points in 80 games, 100-point pace, was unbelievable, and his play driving and pure offensive talent is just unbelievable to watch. And then got Brock Boeser, who has had his ups and downs. 2021 was solid, 2022 wasn't as good, but I do think this line, just in terms of pure offense and play driving, is still gonna hold its own. Next up, let's go on to another line that's really hard to assess, honestly. At number 22, I have the Nashville Predators first line with Philip Forsberg, Ryan Johansson, and Matt Duchene. Now, another line kind of like the Sabres that if we just based it off this last year would be much higher. The problem is Philip Forsberg's really been the only consistent one over these past 3 years, and even then, I mean, 2020 wasn't as good as you'd like, but you see this last year in 2022, 84 points in 69 games, 42 goals. Johansson having another great, another similar kind of career year, almost 63 points in 79 games, and Matt Duchene being unbelievable, 86 points in 78 games. So you see Duchene and Forsberg having career seasons. We'll see how much of that replicates on a next season. For now, I'll keep him at this spot. Now, we've seen some lines so far that definitely will be higher after next year, but there's very few lines out there that I think are going to have as much of a jump as this next one. Coming in at number 21, I have the Ottawa Senators first line with Brady Tkachuk, Josh Norris, and Drake Bafferson. Now, you could have the DeBrincat, Stützle, and Giroux line technically as the first line, but I think they're technically going to be the second line, while this line is the one getting maybe not more minutes offensively, but more minutes overall and in key situations. But the kid line, in my opinion, is going to be so fun to watch. You see Brady Tkachuk over these past 3 years slowly developing that offensive game more and more. Same thing with Josh Norris and having a career year goal scoring wise, 35 goals, 55 points in 66 games, and Drake Bafferson being right around that point per game level. I think if they're healthy and if they're complete next season, I think this will be a line that will be one to be reckoned with on top of that deadly second line. And even though defense might just be a little bit optional, I still think they're going to be so much fun to watch. But now we can move on to number 20, just entering the top 20 here. And I could see maybe having the Sens in front of them, but as for right now, I have at number 19, or at number 20, the Columbus Blue Jackets with Johnny Gaudreau, Boone Jenner, and Patrik Laine. Now, Johnny Gaudreau is obviously the one leading the pack here, the 115-point season, absolutely unbelievable. He's going to be a guy really play driving the most on this line, and to be the weak link is Boone Jenner. Even though this last year was pretty great for him, you see the past 3 seasons, I mean 17 points in 41 games in 2021 is rather weak, but I do feel like as that line gets a lot of time, as Gaudreau enters the lineup, I could see it being a lot better. And of course, you got Patrick Laine's goal scoring and play driving as well, and I think offensively it's one of the better ones on the list. But then moving on to number 19, and a pretty good all-around line in my opinion. Next up, let's go on to the LA Kings first line with Adrian Kempe, Anze Kopitar, and Kevin Fiala. And I'm really interested to see how this line works, because especially with both Kempe and Fiala and how creative and how shifty they can be on offense, it's going to be really fun to see how they fit into that top 6. But you got Kempe there, who really just had a great season, especially goal scoring wise, 35 goals in 78 games. You of course got Kopitar, who at age 35 is still at such a great level. This last year, 67 points in 81 games. And then you got Kevin Fiala, who had a career year for himself in Minnesota, got traded to LA. I don't know if he'll be as good as he was last year, but I do think he's going to be around maybe just below a point per game level and be really consistent for LA. Now on to number 18, and next up we have the New Jersey Devils first line with Andre Palat, newly acquired, Jack Hughes, and Jesper Bratt. Another one that I do think will definitely be higher after next year, and compared to like 2 years ago is way higher than what he used to be. But I do think definitely Jack Hughes and Jesper Bratt are the ones leading the way offensively, while Andre Palat brings a lot in both sides of the ice and that playoff experience. So honestly, I feel like it's a great blend of almost everything, and again, a line that I expect, if healthy, which is the big thing, will be higher after this next year. Another line that has improved so much over these last couple of years. Now let's go on to number 17 with the Detroit Red Wings first line, Lucas Raymond, Dylan Larkin, and Tyler Bertuzzi. So much chemistry between these 3 guys, but you see the production. I mean, with Lucas Raymond, you got 57 points in 82 games. Dylan Larkin having a career year this last year, 69 points in 71 games. And Tyler Bertuzzi, when he did play 68 games, 62 points. And that's the thing. I feel like even though we've seen this line still for a pretty short time, all things considered, they've already gelled so incredibly well with, again, Dylan Larkin bringing much of the two-way game and the goal scoring that this line really wants. But again, just as Lucas Raymond improves, as all 3 of these guys improve, you got a pretty great set of top-end guys in Detroit. Next up, let's go on to a line that is a really weird one to assess, all things considered, in the Vegas Golden Knights with Chandler Stevenson, Jack Eichel, and Mark Stone. Now, I gotta say, thankfully for this line, we're not just taking a look at this last year, or else it would be much, much lower. But taking into account the past 3 years, you got Chandler Stevenson, great production with Vegas. I mean, this last year, 64 points in 79 games, absolutely unreal. You got Jack Eichel, who again, over these past 3 seasons, when he was healthy and completely healthy, still pretty good. You got that 2020 season where he was unbelievable. And then you got Mark Stone. Even though he didn't play that many games this last year, you still have an unbelievable 2021. You still have an unbelievable 2020. And to me, if healthy, I think this Golden Knights first line is still top 20 in the league and probably should be higher, but again, that health and just the inconsistencies take it away. Now, going to a line that's pretty much the exact opposite of the Vegas Golden Knights, of one that's really influenced by recency bias, at least for me, but I just love watching it so much, with the St. Louis Blues first line in Pavel Buchnevich, Robert Thomas, and Vladimir Tarasenko. Now, I think Pavel Buchnevich is probably the most consistent out of these 3. You see over the past 3 years, there's solid production and then just a boom in production again, above a point per game, 76 points in 73 games. But really, he was playing that good all that time, but was waiting to explode in St. Louis. Then you got Robert Thomas, who has had an interesting 3 years, really broke out in a big way in my opinion in 2020, then was horrible in 2021, but then came back and was as good as he's ever been, 77 points in 72 games. And then Tarasenko, injured in 2020, injured in 2021, then above a point per game, 82 points in 2022. But I will say this, if they continue, if they're healthy, they will be higher. But I think for the Blues especially with the growth of Robert Thomas, that's a revelation for them, and it makes their top 6 so much more scary. Next up, let's go on to another Central team's first line here, and let's go at number 14. We're officially now, again, inside the top 15. And next up, I have the Winnipeg Jets in Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, and Blake Wheeler. Now, I will say this first line wasn't really too much of a thing this last year, but I do think with Rick Bowness coming in, he loves to group all his big guys right at the very top. Did that with Robertson, Hintz, and Pavelski in Dallas, and really started that line and got it going. So I feel like that's what we're going to see in Winnipeg. All the best offensive players all together, and hopefully if Bowness gets his way, more defensive responsibility. But you see Connor over these past 3 years, legendary offensive results. You see Scheifele, great offensive results. You see Blake Wheeler, not as good, but still pretty good offensive results. To me, the problem is just all three of these guys are the worst defensive players on Winnipeg. So if they end up going with this, where they have them all together, it's gonna be a roller coaster, and a pretty good one too. Now let's go to a line here at number 13 that has two dynamite players, but also just a little bit of a wink link, and I feel like this is what kind of puts it back from maybe being a top 10 line, with the New York Rangers and Chris Kreider, Mika-Zibanejad, and Alexis Lafreniere. Now here's the thing, Chris Kreider, unbelievable, especially this last year, 52 goals, 77 points in 81 games, great in the playoffs as well. Mika-Zibanejad at age 29, just being banging over these past 3 years, an unbelievable playoffs, 24 points in 20 games. But you do still have Alexis Lafreniere there, and even as much as I love him, as much as I think he's going to be fantastic, he's still only really been okay in his NHL career so far, and that definitely takes it away from being a true top 10 line. But Chris Kreider and Mika-Zibanejad by themselves are just some of the best in their positions. Now, speaking of best at their positions, let's go on to number 12 here, and a really interesting one here next up. In the Minnesota Wild's first line with Kirill Kaprizov, Ryan Hartman, and Matt Zuccarello. Now, you have arguably maybe the best left winger in the league. I still just barely prefer Marchand, but I feel like Kaprizov after this next year is going to be at that number 1 spot. Just unbelievable over these past couple of years, and just an unbelievable 2022, 108 points. Then you also got Ryan Hartman, who you would think is the weak link, and I would say he is, but this last year he was unbelievable. 65 points, 34 goals, and pushing play at a rate he's never pushed before. And then you also got Matt Zuccarello on the right side, who at age 35 has been a lot, maybe the more quiet guy on that line, but just effective in his playmaking and passing game, and 79 points in 70 of the games this last year, also being unbelievable. And I do think for this Wild team, even though I feel like that first line might have had its peak, I still think they're going to be great next year as Kaprizov somehow gets better and better. Now let's go on to the last team outside the top 10, and just barely above the Minnesota Wild, but it's literally by a hair here. At number 11, though, I have the Carolina Hurricanes first line with Teuvo Teravainen, Sebastian Aho, and Max Pacioretty. Now, there's a couple of players on this list that I have on the first line, even though they will be injured at the start of the season. Max Pacioretty, Tom Wilson, and Brad Marchand, I think, are the big ones there. Pacioretty, of course, being a part of that. Even though he will miss the big chunk of the first half, I think eventually he's going to be on that first line with Teravainen and Aho, and you see over these past 3 seasons just being consistent in his goal scoring and offense. Same thing with Aho as well, and getting steadily better defensively as he goes too. And this last year, above a point per game, same thing in 2021. And of course, Teravainen, who even though this in 2021 was pretty banged up, got back healthy in 2022 and was solid, especially in the playoffs. And I just think for this Canes first line, it's decent in a lot of key areas, in the goal scoring and the playmaking, and in Teravainen's case defensively. And I do think it brings a lot of really important parts to the game. But next up, let's enter the top 10 with the 10th ranked first line here. And let's go on to another Metro team with the Washington Capitals in Alex Ovechkin here. With Alex Ovechkin, you have Evgeny Kuznetsov and Tom Wilson as a pretty interesting first line mix. You, of course, have Ovechkin, who over the past 3 seasons has continued to be amazing. In this last year, 90 points, 50 goals in 77 games, just looking like he's in his prime again. You got Evgeny Kuznetsov, who has been woefully inconsistent, had a pretty rough 2021, but was unbelievable in 2022. Really got his pace back to his game and his energy, and was amazing for them. And then you got Tom Wilson, who again, I still think is at this point a little bit underrated. Will miss a big chunk of the first half of this next year, but you see this last season, 52 points in 78 games, and you consider the play pushing, the defense, and the physical game he has. And to me, I think this is an extremely well-rounded first line with great goal scoring, great creativity, and great physical play with Tom Wilson too. Now getting deeper inside the top 10, going to number 9, I have the new Calgary Flames first line with Jonathan Huberdeau, Elias Lindholm, and Tyler Toffoli. Now, you could have possibly Nazem Kadri as the first line center, but I do have a feeling that Kadri will start out as the second line C, but I have a feeling that Jonathan Huberdeau will definitely be taking the first line left wing. But you got, of course, that absolute absolute dynamite offense in Huberdeau, a pretty balanced mix of playmaking and defensive style of Elias Lindholm, as well as Tyler Toffoli, who I would say is a little bit of a weak link on this line, but still can carry a zone and especially get those clutch goals, which alongside a playmaker like Jonathan Huberdeau, I think is going to be perfect for him. Now on to number 8, my favorite first line in the league, because it comes from my favorite team, but also because they carry my team every single time. Going on to number 8, I have the first line for the Dallas Stars of Jason Robertson, Roope Hintz, and Joe Pavelski. Now there is a case to be made that they could maybe a little bit higher, but I also think Jason Robertson, maybe not having that third year of 2020 does kind of damper it a little bit, but I also do think when you look at the past couple of years of Robertson's dominance, you see Roope Hintz just developing into such a great two-way forward and goal-scoring threat, and you also have Joe Pavelski, who I do think, because of his kind of slow start in 2020, it also, again, puts a little bit less stock in it, but at the same time has been one of the best two-way forwards since coming to Dallas, and to me, it's one of the better defensive first lines on the entire list. Now, moving on to number 7, a line that if it was just judged on one player would absolutely be number 1, but that's not how lines work. Let's go on to the Edmonton Oilers at number 7 with the line of Evander, Kane, Connor McDavid, and Jesse Puljujarvi. Now, you could have maybe Zach Hyman as the first line right wing, but I have a feeling that Puljujarvi will be a first line right wing, or maybe Hyman is a second line left wing perhaps. But if this is what they roll with, I still think it's very, very good and obviously top 10 in the league. You got Evander Kane, who when he has played with San Jose and Edmonton has been incredible, and this last year gelled immediately, especially in the playoffs, getting 13 goals in 15 games. You have Connor McDavid, who's pretty okay himself comparatively. You got 123 points in 80 games this last year. He's okay. He's decent. And then you got Jesse Puljujarvi, which I love Jesse Puljujarvi, but he definitely is kind of the weak link. He's kind of the lesser player on this line, but still I think plays his role pretty well as a guy that can mix in the playmaking and the play driving. But let's be honest, having Zach Hyman on here would definitely have them higher, but I also think for Edmonton, you still have Connor McDavid, so it doesn't matter too much. Next up, though, going on to number 6, a line that, in my opinion, is extremely underrated. Let's go on to the Pittsburgh Penguins first line with Jake Guentzel, Sidney Crosby, and Brian Rust. You guys heard my Brian Rust rant on the right winger list, how underrated I thought he was. But you see Jake Guentzel over these past 3 years, one of the more underrated scorers and dual threat guys in the NHL. You got Sidney Crosby, who's still, I mean, he's 35 years old. He's going to be 36 by the time the season starts. Had 84 points in 69 games and 10 points in six playoff games. And you got Brian Rust, who's still holding up incredibly well, and you got that kind of grindy game that he brings. And to me, you got the great balance of youthful energy in Guentzel, amazing spirit, and still a great two-way game in Crosby, and that dynamic physical play of Rust. And to me, it is just unbelievably amazing. But now let's enter the top 5 first lines in the NHL, and let's go on to a line that I think is going to be absolutely dynamite this next year. The rest of the forward group will have some question marks still, but for the first line, I think the Florida Panthers are going to be unbelievable. You got Carter Verhaeghe on the left, Alexander Barkov in the middle, and Matthew Tkachuk on the right. And to me, no matter what happens in Florida next year, this first line will not be the problem. You got Carter Verhaeghe, who's become extremely underrated, and this last year had 55 points in 78 games, was an absolute madman in the playoffs. 12 points, 6 goals in 10 games. You got Alexander Barkov, who's continually getting better and better, and this last year, in my opinion, has best overall year, 88 points in 67 games. And then you got Matthew Tkachuk, who had his best overall year, 104 points in 82 games. And to me, although I don't think he'll be as good, having Alexander Barkov as your center will still be pretty good for Tkachuk, and I think he'll thrive with the Panthers. Next up, moving on to number 4, and another Atlantic Division first line, a line that has lost a little bit of its luster, but to me is still a top 5 line in the league, with Brad Marchand, Patrice Bergeron, and David Pastrnak of the Boston Bruins. Now, of course, with Marchand being out for the first couple of months of the season, that will likely not be the line then, and this last year, I think another reason why I have it a little bit lower is because that wasn't really all too used this last year. There were times where Marchand would be on a different line, or Pastrnak would be on a different line, and it would kind of be broken up a little bit, which does kind of take the sails out of it. But when it is still together, when it is still clicking, you got great defensive dynamism in Patrice Bergeron, amazing play driving and snarl in Brad Marchand, and some of the best goal scoring you'll get in the league in Pastrnak. When it is on and when it is together, it's got some of the best mix in the league. Speaking though of fantastic mix, let's go on to number 3 and another Atlantic Division first line. Now let's go on to the Toronto Maple Leafs with Michael Bunting, Auston Matthews, and Mitch Marner. And to me, especially this next year, I think we're going to see that mix just be even better in so many ways. You got Michael Bunting, of course, who had his rookie season this last year, 63 points in 79 games, but brings that bang and crash, unbelievable play along the boards. You got Auston Matthews, who's the best goal scorer in the league, and the second best player in the league in my opinion, 106 points in 73 games, 60 goals this last year. And you also got Mitch Marner, who this last season was on pace for way above 100 points, got 97 in 72 games. But to me, you have the amazing playmaking and creativity of Marner, you got the best shot and goal scoring in the league in Matthews, and you got that snarl of Michael Bunting. And even though this next year might be the last year we see it because of Bunting's impending contract, it's gonna be really good while it lasts. But there are only 2 first lines in the NHL left, so let's go on to number 2 here. Next up, I'm gonna go to another line that's kind of been broken up at points and even in the playoffs a little bit, but when they are together is absolutely money. Going on to number 2, I have from the Tampa Bay Lightning, another Atlantic Division first line with Steven Stamkos on the left, Brayden Point at center, and Nikita Kucherov on the right. Now, again, this is a line that isn't always used. Sometimes it'll be different. Sometimes you'll see maybe Killorn up there, or maybe you'll see Point as a second line center. But having them all together, to me, I think they create some of the best offense in the league. You got, of course, Steven Stamkos, who's been dynamite over these past 3 years and just had an unbelievable season this last year in the regular season and the playoffs. You got Brayden Point, who has had some inconsistencies, but then you also got Nikita Kucherov, who has, although missed a lot of time, when he has been healthy, has been still one of the best wingers in the entire league. But I think one of the main reasons why they are this high is just the chemistry, as well as being some of the best playoff players in the entire league over these past 3 years, and being some of the main reasons why Tampa has been such a dynamite and really consistent playoff team. But there is only one first line that is better. At number 1, let's go on to the first line that just won the Stanley Cup. Let's go on to the Colorado Avalanche with Gabriel Landeskog, Nathan MacKinnon, and Mikko Rantanen. Now, to me, after this Cup win, to me, it's undeniable just how unreal this first line is. And we were talking about throughout this whole video the mix of play styles and how it can create such a dynamic first line. But you see it in the best ways, with Gabriel Landeskog bringing the leadership a little bit less intense, but still brings the physicality and the hits and the play driving when you want it, and is really underrated defensively. And you see over these past 3 years, and you see in both the regular season and the playoffs how good he was this last season. You of course have Nathan MacKinnon, who, even though he has dealt with some injuries, when he has played, has still been one of the best centers and players in the entire league. And you got Mikko Rantanen, who in my opinion is the best first line right wing, and this last year was unbelievable in both the playoffs and the regular season, and continues to get better and better in both ends of the ice. Really improved his defensive play this last year, and to me, all 3 guys can play great in all 3 zones and drive play at such an elite rate. And to me, there's almost nothing wrong with it. I don't want to ever call any line a perfection line, but to me, this Avs first line is as close as it gets. But that is going to be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you did enjoy, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. You probably have many disagreements, so let me know in the comments down below, what do you agree and disagree with my list, and what would your list look like, and where do you think your favorite team's first line should be? Let us know down below. Of course, share this video with your friends, get it to all the hockey fans you guys know online. Click this card for my hockey rankings content round 1 playlist, and I will see you in the next video. Have a good one, and goodbye.